imposing Hindi, imposing national symbols, imposing uniformity internally. This is not what Indian nationalism has ever been. It is copycat nationalism. What are we copying? We are copying German nationalism of the worst phase. Putting up a woman in the press conference is nice, but now please act upon it in the real life as well. What we are witnessing in the last 11 years is not just intellectual arrogance, not just political arrogance, but simple exclusion from the rule of law.
Hello and welcome to TheFederal. You're watching Off the Beaten Track, a program in which we pick up one single issue and have an in-depth conversation with an eminent public figure. We are going to be talking about something which we talk about every day, that is nationalism. In fact, nationalism has become one of the favorite weapons to score political brownie points in our political terrain. Now, if we actually go back into history, we'll find that right from the time of our national movement or the freedom struggle, nationalism was a contested terrain in the sense that there were clearly two different kinds of definitions or perspectives to see it. One was the inclusive secular nationalism, and the other one which defined itself as a cultural nationalism, or basically saying that the people constituted the nation, not a more complex set of territory and ideas which actually make a nation. Perspectives differ, the way of looking at nationalism differs, and after India became independent, these two divergent trends continued. But in the last 10 years, especially after 2014, nationalism has become a tool of othering people. It has always been said, especially by the ruling regime, that if you are not with us, that means you are anti-national, you are not patriotic. Now, I am going to be talking about this intensely complex issue which affects our daily life. Even as we breathe, it is actually affecting us, with Yogendra Yadav, who's a very well-known public figure, somebody who wears multiple hats, who is a public intellectual at one level, an activist, a political scholar, a psephologist at one time. But we are talking with him because he wrote an article to kickstart this entire debate once again. So, Yogendra Bhai, first of all, thank you very much for coming and joining me on this very important and meaningful discussion, which I'm sure that even a few years later is going to be of immense archival value, because the idea of nationalism, as I explained, is more than 100 years old and has been a contested terrain. So, first of all, thank you for joining me on this program.
Thanks, Nilanjan. Always a pleasure to speak to you.
Now, in your first article, you have written two articles in the Indian Express. I will come to the sequence later on, because I want to get straight away to the meat of the matter. And, because you have been writing in the mainstream media for so long, you have gone straight away to the heart of the matter with your first sentence, where you say that, you begin with the assumption that there has been a backsliding of Indian nationalism in recent years. And the biggest proof comes in the context of the Indo-Pakistan conflict and its aftermath. So this has been provided in ample measure. You say it is not that we have become overly nationalist. You use the word overly nationalist in quotes. The real problem is that our nationalism has become overly imitative. And then you go on to say, who are we imitative? That this copycat nationalism is parroting a German monster, mimics the Israeli state, and attempts to clone a Hindu Pakistan. And most importantly, you say that we cannot blame only Narendra Modi, the Sangh Parivar, and the BJP for this. We have to go into roots which lie fairly long and maybe even forgotten. So first of all, I think we need to understand from you what you are saying, that overly imitative. This is your first postulation. I would like to understand more from you and definitely help the people who are watching this discussion to get a better understanding of your perspective on this?
Thanks, Nilanjan. The starting point is exactly what you say it is. We have become in the last few years, especially in the last 10 years, especially in the last 25, 30 years, but generally we've been used to now a certain meaning of the word nationalism, which is very, very odd. You said right in your introduction that nationalism, the word has become a weapon. Now it pains me to hear this because, this is not what it was. Nationalism has been our resource. Nationalism is our strength. Nationalism is our currency. Nationalism defines the Indian thinking for nearly 100 years. The most positive, the most humane, the most open-ended. And that nationalism has today been turned into a narrow sectarian weapon. That is the starting point of my anxiety. Because Indian, what do we understand by the word nationalist? So someone who comes and says, very often people meet me and say, sir, वैसे आप बहुत अच्छा बोलते हैं, मीठा बोलते हैं, लेकिन आपके साथ वैचारिक मतभेद है. And I say, so what is वैचारिक मतभेद, भाई? Says, मैं थोड़ा राष्ट्रवादी. Now, what is the word Rashtravadi? Because I also think I'm Rashtravadi.
That's right.
But what do we mean by Rashtravadi? Unfortunately, from the supporters and the critics from both sides, now there is a kind of a consensus. What does it mean to be a nationalist? Nationalist means that you are very aggressively jingoist vis-a-vis your neighbors. Pakistan ko khatam kar do, Islamabad ko, as someone said, end game of Pakistan. So one is very aggressive posturing vis-a-vis your neighbors. Secondly, within the country, Rashtravadi now means having uniformity, not unity, uniformity. One nation, one this, one nation, one that, etc., etc. So that's the second meaning of the word Rashtravadi. Externally, about aggressiveness, internally about homogenization and uniformity. This is what Indian nationalism never was. Nationalism is about belonging, obviously. And Indian nationalism began as a way of bringing Indians together against not the British, not the English race, not the white, but against colonialism. So my nationalism brought me, never pitted me against my neighbor. My nationalism actually brought me closer to South Africa, to the Black people in South Africa, to those who are suffering from colonialism in Latin America. My nationalism connected me to Bandung in Southeast Asia. My nationalism connected me to the Palestinians.
And even to the underprivileged in other countries.
Absolutely. So my nationalism actually meant that I connected to all kinds of disadvantaged groups. Right. So my nationalism was universalist right from day one. Internally, my nationalism never demanded uniformity. My nationalism was a nationalism of Punjab, Sindh, Gujarat, Maratha, Dravid, Utkal, Banga. This is not a nationalism that was ashamed of my linguistic diversity in this country. In fact, it foregrounds it. My nationalism said it is only by being a Tamil that you become an Indian, by being a Bengali that you become an Indian. I would never ask you, are you a Tamil, are you an Indian? Because that's a ridiculous question. Now, so internal deep acceptance of diversity, externally connecting to similarly placed people or unity of the people of the world is what Indian nationalism was about. It was, to put it in a formulaic phrase, Indian nationalism was about belonging without othering. That nationalism today has been reduced to this nationalism that seeks to other all the time. We need an enemy outside, we need an enemy inside, imposing Hindi, imposing national symbols, imposing uniformity internally. This is not what Indian nationalism has ever been. So where has it come from? It is copycat nationalism. What are we copying? We are copying German nationalism of the worst phase. I have nothing against Germany, nothing
Right.
against German nationalism in general,
We're talking
but
about the 1930s and 40s, right?
1920s, 30s, and 40s, the
40s.
worst phase of human life, the worst thing that nationalism can be identified with. So we are picking the worst possible ideology. Who are we trying to copy in terms of modern states? Israel. I mean, one country that no one should copy, Israel. That's what so we're trying to copy the Israeli state. And in
Mhm.
essence, this is an attempt to try to create a Hindu Pakistan. Why should we try to create Hindu Pakistan? Is Pakistan such a lovely place that anyone should wish to copy it? Is it such a successful experiment that we should seek to replicate it? Remember, this country got divided within the first 30 years of its existence
Mhm.
because the idea was untenable. So we're trying to copy an untenable. So in general, my pain, my unease, my complaint is that we are copying a failed European nation state model. While in India, we have had much better models of how to be a nation. That is my pain. That's my problem. That's my anxiety. And when both sides surrender, when my friends also start saying, oh my God, that this is, they are being, we should not be so nationalist. I get worried. But since when have you started accepting this? Because the moment you start saying this as well, liberal, progressive, and everyone has turned their back to it and they are saying, oh my God, this is nationalist response. If you give up on nationalism, you give up on one of the most valuable idea, resource, heritage of this country. And that is so that's why I say towards the end that we cannot blame only the RSS and the BJP. In fact, it is a certain gross neglect by the liberal, progressive, radical left wing, from liberal to left. There has been a systematic neglect of Indian nationalism, which is what has handed it over on a platter to the BJP RSS to distort it, to disfigure
Mhm.
it, to capture it, and to now use it against the people, against our freedoms, against our democracy.
Yes, using it against the democracy is something most, frightening. And one of the things, of course, is, the right to disagree, have a differing viewpoint. Now, in the context of, after the military conflict with with India and Pakistan, one of the most important controversies which has come to light involves this professor of the Ashoka University, Ali Khan Mahmoodabad, against whom a case was filed. A fairly, a dense, issue which you also tackled in your article. You, in fact, actually said, that what happened in the Supreme Court, you use fairly harsh words saying chatter of uncles or an exchange between the headmaster and parents on whether a boy was well behaved or not. Now, do you find it, I wouldn't give my opinion to you, let me phrase it as a question. Do you find the directive of the Supreme Court to form a special investigative team to what I say is essentially to determine the linguistic nuance and the undertones of his Facebook posts? This is completely out of the ambit of any criminal investigating agencies, people with the background in the Indian police being asked to investigate this. What, to your mind, does this reveal of our judiciary, of our judicial process?
Nilanjana, there's something comic here, there's something deeply frightening here. Uh, what does Professor Ali Mahmoodabad say?
Hmm.
In a post immediately after the Indo-Pak conflict, military conflict, he says, number one, it signals what are the key points of it, because people don't read before all this controversy takes place. He says, number one, that it suggests a significant shift in India's military doctrine. He says it positively, affirmative. In fact, something that should that a professor of political science can indicate a careful understanding of strategic affairs, which anyone standing on India's side should celebrate. Second, he comments on the press conference done by military officer belonging to diverse faiths. He says, that's nice, but let us not stop at this tokenism. If you just put up a Muslim face in a press conference, but that is exactly when Muslims are being attacked on the street, then it looks just like a tokenism. Please extend this symbolism to something deep. Third, he says all the warmongering which is taking place is dangerous because these people who advocate war never pay the price for war. Tell me, what is exceptional about it? What is anti-national about it? What is anti-women about it? You may agree with him. You may disagree with him. But when has the Indian state said warmongering is our official ideology? In fact, the foreign secretary actually said that these warmongers are damaging national interests. When is it, what is wrong, what is anti-women about saying that putting up a woman in the press conference is nice, but now please act upon it in the real life as well? What is anti-women? When this question was posed to the chairperson of Haryana Women's Commission, I mean, she could not utter one word to defend this. And what is wrong in someone saying India's military doctrine has changed for the better? Now, this is the thing that is being discussed in the Supreme Court. You have one of the senior most lawyers of the country, and you have the would-be Chief Justice of India. Now, in the Supreme Court, what discussion do you expect? You expect the court to say, all right,
that's right.
Here is a piece of writing. Does it fall within the ambit of the freedoms accorded to you in the Constitution? Or does it fall under one of the exceptions that have been granted? Fair enough. Court may take whichever view. It's after all court's view. The striking thing is that it does not figure in the conversation at all. The idea that there are constitutionally guaranteed freedoms, the idea that there is a rule of law, the idea that people can, that sedition and anti-nationalism, etc., have a specific legal meaning. All this does not enter. What is the conversation about? My lord, he's very patriotic. No, you can't do it like this. अरे ऐसे ही बोल दोगे कोई duties भी होती हैं कि नहीं होती हैं? So this is what appears to be an uncle's chatter. This is what I hear when I go for a walk in the park. I do not expect this in the Supreme Court of India. The court, judiciary, is absolute. It's the highest court of the land, which is to determine what I get, what is it that I'm entitled to as a citizen of this country. When that does not even figure, and mind you, I do not blame Mr. Kapil Sibal because, like an astute lawyer, he could read the mind of the court, and he was playing only those arguments which would get his client the relief, but which is actually even more dangerous. That he could not stand up and say, my lord, there is Article 19 of the Constitution. You may agree with him, you may disagree with him, that doesn't matter. He's entitled to say it. So the idea that you can say things that the Supreme Court judges may disagree with, that is the foundation of my freedom. If I can only say things which judges agree with, then what freedom do I have? So in that sense, the funny thing and the tragic thing was that the reference to the Indo-Pak military conflict was made, nationalism was invoked, and after that it was clear that any discussion about freedom and democracy did not exist. Using nationalism against freedom and democracy is a tragic mutilation of the idea of nationalism.
Right, basically one point which I feel that in the last 11 years, it is now 11 years since Mr. Modi has been the Prime Minister of this country, there has been a greater vehemence of saying that only our way is correct. If our way is not acceptable to you, please take the highway and then go away. Do you find that this kind of an exclusivist campaign has been mounted in the last 10 years, especially against the religious minorities? And if so, what choice does it leave the Indian minorities, especially the Muslims?
That's a serious question, you see, because ruling parties are usually arrogant. People who used to be in power earlier also used to be arrogant. Intellectually, they used to be very arrogant. And they used to say, in fact, we'll come to that later when I talk about the left and the liberal reaction to nationalism. They also used to say, well, if you don't believe in us, then you are conservative, you are retrograde, you are jingoist, and things of that kind. So yes, I can see that. But what we are witnessing in the last 11 years is not just intellectual arrogance, not just political arrogance, but simple exclusion from the rule of law. If you do not agree with me, the constitutional guarantees do not apply to you. If you do not agree with me, then the basic tenets of rule of law do not hold. That is what is dangerous. And yes, of course, in the case of minorities, effectively, for all practical purposes, the Indian Muslims have been reduced to the status of a second-class citizen. And if there was a formal confirmation for that, the CAA was the stat. What is the essence of Citizenship Amendment Act? The essence is no Muslims, please, we are Indian. So if you're coming from outside, I want to put up this banner, no Muslims, please. Everyone else is welcome, not Muslims. What are you saying? Basically, you are saying, well, this country is not meant for Muslims because they are second-class citizens. This message to about 200 million people in your own country. And when the prime minister of the country dog whistles, calls them Ghuspetia, makes those kinds of insinuations at Muslims, that is that's effectively downgrading their citizenship status. So yes, it is one of the darkest moments in India's democratic journey. When at the time of partition, many Muslims said to Mr. Jinnah, "You are leaving, and you are going to Pakistan. You are doing what you want to do, but you are leaving us at the mercy of a majority's whims." Many of them might feel that that's exactly what has happened, because the democratic mechanism that we have evolved does not provide adequate protections for minority rights, and the protections that did exist in the Constitution are being negated one after another. And when you expect the Supreme Court of this country to step in and safeguard that, because after all, who guarantees my Constitution? The Supreme Court. And when the Supreme Court fails to do so, how would a minority feel? So yes, it's a very dark moment. I hope not a permanent moment. But yes, it's a very dark moment for minorities of this country. And it's amazing that they have shown a certain kind of resilience in the face of such repression, such systematic downgrading of their status. They have shown resilience and faith in democratic function.
Right. The first article that you wrote in the Indian Express, and that evoked a large number of responses from people. One of the most important responses came from your co-author, who's been part of your intellectual pursuits for several decades, at least 3 to 4 decades, Professor Suhas Palshikar. It would have been really ideal if he had also been part of our discussion, but somehow we just couldn't make it feasible. We miss his contribution in this discussion. But, I felt that one of the points where he had a slight disagreement with you was on the emphasis of the responsibility. I got the feeling that he felt that you are allowing the present. I could be wrong on this, but this is my reading of what his critique of your piece was. It's not actually a full critique. It is actually just an aside comment. With marginal disagreements, that the primary responsibility must be more with this past 11 years and the people who have ruled this country, past 11 years. The others are also responsible, but maybe we should not talk about them in the same vein. Now, basically, I need to understand that we did not emerge from partition as a perfect state. We did emerge as a broken state, and we did try to mend, and we did, despite riots, we kept on trying to always mend and foster, good relationship between various communities. At least till my generation, and possibly also your generation, because you would be a few years younger than me. We grew up with this belief in the unity in diversity slogan, right? But now one doesn't hear it. This unity in diversity has become absolutely awful. It's not heard. That fantastic, song which was anchored by Bhimsen Joshi in the 1980s, Mile Sur Hamara Tumhara, I'm forgetting the exact lyrics, but those kind of efforts to say that despite our differences, we are one. Now it is that we are not one. We are one if you are agreeing to become like me. Otherwise, you're not one.
On Professor Suhas Palshikar's difference, I mean, it's not a real difference. It supplements. And of course, I would have no disagreement with him to say that the principal responsibility must be borne by the BJP RSS, which has stolen, in his words, the Indian nationalism. Of course, that's true. We can't possibly have a difference. But, my only difference would be to say when something is stolen from me, of course, I say who stole it. But I also wonder, what did I make a mistake? Did I put it somewhere where it could have easily been stolen? So it's always good to allow some fingers to point at yourself, which is the spirit in which I carry out this. So there's no disagreement. But I don't think we should... and the only point of disagreement that I have with Professor Palshikar, if at all, is that I think the liberal, secular, progressive, modern left elite, which ruled this country for the first 50 years, it cannot escape the responsibility.
That's right.
Of not attending to Indian nationalism in a way that it should have been attended to. Because if it's only when you fail to do things that someone else can steal it. Why did we leave it in a situation that it could be stolen? That's the question. And my sense is that Indian elite was indifferent. That after the first generation, after the 50s or so, 50s was a very tense moment. And as a matter of fact, as a historian, you would know, if someone would say, if RSS kind of politics was to emerge in India, 50s was the right decade, because millions of refugees had come to India with the kind of very painful and tragic personal experiences that they had. That is the time when this politics could have taken off. It did not. And when it did not, then I think our elite became complacent. And much of that investment in the symbols of nationalism that we should have made was not made. Gradually, our elite was, let me say, non-aligned vis-a-vis nationalism. Because the problem with the English-speaking Indian elite is that it imagines that it is living a European life. So all its successes are measured in terms of European history. If something nice happens in 19th century Bengal, we call it Renaissance Bengal, which it was not. And anything bad that happens, we also look for examples in European history, fascism, Nazism, and things of that kind. So the problem with Indian elite was that it adopted vicariously the guilt of German nationalism. The word national, in Europe, if you say there's a nationalist party, what does it mean? It means it's a racist party. It's a party of white supremacism. It is an immigrant party. Exactly. It is a party which is a Jjingoist party. This is not what the word nationalism ever meant in India. How have we adopted this European understanding of nationalism? Because our intellectual elite and our political elite in some ways our policymakers, our modern Indian elite adopted this vicarious guilt of European nationalism. We started being awkward and uneasy about nationalism. And that was so maintaining Indian nationalism was not easy. It was a very precious and a very precarious gift that we had from the national movement. You needed to nurture it. You needed to constantly remake it for every new generation. Mile Sur Mera Tumhara was one of those beautiful things. If you look at all the songs of 1950s, early 60s, होठों पे सच्चाई रहती है, यहाँ दिल में सफाई रहती है, हम उस देश के वासी हैं जिस देश में
exactly.
These are ways of forging a nation. These are ways of imaginatively recreating that spirit of nationalism. And then it just declines because our elite is complacent, awkward, and embarrassed about nationalism, and is actually not connected to things that can give you some sense of pride in the nation, which is to say, our elite is completely detached from our cultural and civilizational heritage. They're all speaking English. They're all trying to copy the West. And unlike the freedom struggle, the deep connect that they had with our traditions, even someone like Nehru, who's not very comfortable with any language other than English, who's as anglicized as you can get, even Nehru is so deeply invested in creating that sense of India, discovery of India, the symbols of India, about Sarnath. He's the one who goes and looks for what would be the symbols.
Yes.
The chakra as the symbol of Indian nation, Tiranga. All they're very deeply conscious and invested. My accusation against India's progressive liberal elite, of which all of us you are a part of that, I'm a part of that. We all grew up with that background. So it's self-criticism. And the criticism and the accusation it is because of our complacence, our indifference, and our disinvestment that nationalism could be captured by those who have zero investment in the freedom struggle of India. This is utterly shameful that we gave away our nationalism to those who had nothing to do with Indian nationalism.
After listening to you, I'm just going to be trying to just articulate something which was running through my mind as I was listening to you. Would you say that, because of a very strong argument from the Hindu right-wing forces of cultural nationalism, the English-speaking elite or the westernized elite or the liberal-looking elite or the group of people to which you and I also have belonged, we possibly became a bit wary because of the close intermeshing of culture and religion in the Hindu nationalistic way of defining things, that we also became possibly too wary of culture. We looked at culture also from the perspective of the Hindu right wing, and we did not look at the Indian culture, which was secular, and thereby did not embrace it. Nehru did it when you refer to the chakra. But if you ask the average anti-BJP or the anti-RSS member of the intelligentsia would possibly have some, discomfort with chakra being the India symbol or various kind of symbols which are used to define the nation would be a case. So would you say that this was because of the inability to take away culture from them and leave it enmeshed in religion?
I think we're coming close to the heart of the matter, Nilanjan, because deep underlying, please remember, Indian nationalism was always deeply cultural. All nationalisms in the world are cultural, because what is nationalism? What is a nation? It's an imagined community.
Yes,
you
sir.
basically persuade people who have never met each other to say you all belong to a family. How do you convince them? Through myths, through stories, through memories, through larger metaphors, through symbols, through heroes, through events. That's how you do it. This is what Indian national movement was doing all the time. Everyone was deeply invested in Indian culture and civilization. in its multiplicity. The beauty of that is that they never thought Indian culture and civilization was singular. They always thought it had plural traditions, and its pluralism was to be intertwined to create something beautiful. As I say, Vivid Bharati, the word that we had heard.
Yes. That's a brilliant phrase to use,
we all, grew up believing this was the name of a radio station.
Yeah.
We never thought, step back and say, what is
thought of it as an idea,
It's an idea. Vivid Bharati is an idea. This was the essence of Indian nationalism. The trouble with the post-independence Indian elite, progressive or otherwise, is that they were intellectually more slavish. The Sanskritic Gulami themes. You see, before independence, we knew we were subjects, we were colonized, we had to struggle politically and culturally. The moment we got political freedom, we accepted our cultural servitude. And as a result, our investment in our cultures, our traditions, our religions just went down. And a modern Indian was a person who was hollow in many ways. India's secular modernity, the modern Indian state that we have produced, and modern Indians that we have produced are emotionally, culturally, and spiritually vacuous. And it is in that vacuum that these thugs march. I'm sorry to use such a strong language.
No.
But this thing of garv se kaho hum Hindu hain, taking out a sword in Ram Navami, unheard. This is not our tradition.
These are not the way it was done.
That when you and I say this is not our culture, this is not our civilization, this is not our religion, no one takes us seriously. Because we are not going to be people who can legitimately represent that tradition and culture. This is the sin that we have committed.
You refer to the slogan, Garv se kaho hum Hindu hain. Now, this was actually used by the RSS in the Hedgewar centenary celebrations during the late 1980s, 1988, 89. That is the time when they had a year-long campaign, which was the actual mainstreaming of the entire Sangh Parivar politics. Now, you are aware of the fact that I did granularly write about the Ayodhya and the Ram Janmabhoomi movement. At that point, there were no one, the intellectual leaders of that time were not there to point out that this slogan is fundamentally un-Indian, that this is not something which is part of our Indian culture. You cannot be Garv se kaho hum Hindu hain, Garv se kaho hum Bharatiya hain, ya hum Hindustani hain. That is the right way of saying. So there have been slips. I have always had this very long held grievance against India's progressive intelligentsia and the intellectuals of not recognizing the danger from the Ram Janmabhoomi movement as it was coming up and responding to it very late on that. Let me come to another point.
If I can just add to that,
Sure.
Not getting the basic message. Why did we wake up after 2014? We should have woken up in 1992. The message was quite clear that that you do not connect with the people of India. That that BJP is able to connect with the people, the certain sentiments, in a way that liberal, secular, progressive politics does not. That should have been a wake-up call. That should have been a time when we started investing. And if I were to post something against Garv se kaho hum Hindu hain, I would have posted Swami Vivekananda. All the Indians celebrate the fact that Swami Vivekananda goes to Chicago and delivers that great speech which floors everyone. Swami Vivekananda says that I'm proud of being an Hindu because my religion allows me to accept the truth of every other religion. This is why he's proud. He's not proud. And he clearly says, not because I think it's superior to other religions, because everyone else was coming and saying, my religion is better than yours. He says, my religion recognizes the truth of your religion. That's why I'm proud of my religion. Such a beautiful sentiment.
Beautiful.
That is what we should have invoked. But we had lost the capacity. By 1980s, 90s, India's ruling class intellectually. Suhas Bhai says it's a tiny English-speaking class. Why do you blame it so much? But my problem is the problem of that the ruling class produces ruling ideas. And if those ideas are defective, then they have very lasting consequences. And there was a deep neglect of our plural cultures, traditions, languages, even languages. How many of the top intellectuals of this country read and write in a language other than English? These are harsh questions, questions that are worth asking. And then if we are scandalized about why is it that people of India don't understand what we are saying, well, of course, they won't. If you don't speak their language, they won't understand you.
So, let me actually go to another point, which you raised in your second article. You have raised many things, but because of paucity of time, I'll just try to begin wrapping up our conversation. You talk about the fact of should we be proud of being Indians? Now, the reason why I'm focusing on, because you're right, here we again confront two bad answers. The dominant answer is jingoistic, the political equivalent of football club loyalty. Now, the reason, taking pride in what we are, we are also speaking, on the backdrop of the horrible and a very tragic stampede in Bengaluru. It happened. And this is what is, in one way, this is my understanding is this is a manifestation of the jingoistic nationalism or the jingoistic pride in something which is alien, which is not actually ours. Why should people of Bengaluru be so loyal to a club, which is actually comprised of only cricketers who are virtually mercenary cricketers, today playing for RCB, tomorrow playing for KKR. They're there only to play for money. That is the way these things run. So why should one get so charged up? This entire jingoistic nationalism, it's a manifestation. Yes, मैंने गर्व कर लिया कि मैं हिंदू हूं, उसके आगे बताओ मैं क्या करूं. That is what's happening. Yeah.
There is human beings need a sense of belonging.
Right.
That sense of belonging in traditional rural communities is provided by your extended family, people you live with in the village. That gives you a sense of deep belonging. In urban and in modern societies, that search for belonging takes various forms. Those rowdy football clubs of Europe are a manifestation of that desperate search for that sense of belonging. Those IPL teams in India, which actually mostly have nothing to do with either the state or the culture or the city that they represent, are beginning to become expressions of that. So that,
Yes.
So while you and I object to the expressions that this search takes, let us not misunderstand, let us not overlook the quest itself. It's a quest for belonging. This quest produces IPL loyalties. The same quest produces Kumbh and Garv se kaho hum Hindu hain kind of stuff. And the same quest produces what is called the kind of nationalism that the BJP RSS is promoting. And the way to relate to that is to provide a deep sense of belonging, positive sense of belonging, which is what Indian nationalism was. When someone in Tamil Nadu was doing Nagari Pracharani Sabha, now whether it's right or wrong doesn't matter, but the fact is that there was this quest for this sense of belonging. When we relate to the northeast of India by connecting in some symbolic way, it is again that sense, positive sense of belonging. If you do not provide that positive sense of belonging, then negative and then vicious forms of belonging will take over. So it was our responsibility. And this is what Indian nationalism did, provided that sense of belonging, which is what we have lost. So to my mind, the answer is creating an alternative sense of belonging. And that could come only by answering those questions, which I've asked in the second essay. What is India? There is an awkwardness on the part of modern Indians in acknowledging that India is inherited to a civilization called India. Should we be proud of India? Yes. Every culture, every civilization in the world has a lot to be ashamed of,
Right.
and has a lot to be proud of. When I look at Indian civilization, culture in its multiplicity, in its plural traditions, the enormous things that I have to be proud of. And incidentally, someone who takes deep pride must feel ashamed of some things. Otherwise, your pride is not serious. If you cannot be ashamed of anything that happens in your house, then you clearly don't love your
Right.
household, then you don't love your family. So yes, proud. And third, a sense of, do we owe something? These are questions liberal, progressive, modern Indians have run away from. What is India? Should I take pride in India? And do I owe something to
Owe something to India.
Yeah, so so in a sense, it's like a child who comes and says, Papa, do you love me? And you say, all children of the world are nice, everything, of course, yesterday you did this one thing that I liked. That's not an answer. The child is asking, do you own me? Do you love me? And our answer is if and but. Unless, and the perverse answer, the BJP's answer, perverse as it might be, Mr. Trump's answer, perverse as it is an answer to say, yes, I love you. Unless we learn to say, yes, I love you, and then provide 15 reasons for that and 20 reasons for not liking. Yes, you are good. Yes, you can be better. We need to, so there has to be an emotional, cultural, and spiritual content to the way we relate to the people. And it is because our politics has lost this that we are where we are.
Well, very well explained. And I think, the real takeaway is that we need to take pride in being Indians, in being what is we consider to be India. And then what you say is that, what we owe to India. When we talk about this, we have to take pride in our entire civilizational past. And we also, unlike the Hindu right wing, we are not going to say that, this so many centuries was actually a century or a period of darkness, of slavery. So we are emerging out of that dark tunnel. We have a past which has had various shades, and it is time for those who have neglected nationalism to give greater thought to it and to seize the idea. Nationalism, as they say, is not in the custody of any political grouping. It is for all Indians to claim as their rightful idea. Thank you very much, Yogendra Yadav, for joining me on this program. It's always a great delight to speak to you, and I hope that our viewers will gain better ways of looking at Indian nationalism, something which they have to confront more and more every day as time goes by. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you, Nilanjan. Always a pleasure.